Hello everybody. Today on the channel, it's the car that I hate to love, the Porsche Cayenne. And why is that? Well, simple. The Cayenne, well, it's a little bit brilliant. To the extent that I actually once upon a time bought one, a first generation example turbo. But today you find me behind the wheel of a third generation Cayenne Coupe GTS. And the smart money says that if you are on the hunt for a relatively new 4x4 and you've got your eyes on a Cayenne, this could be the one to buy. But is it? Well, I'm here in beautiful Andorra and I intend to find out. I'm fairly confident that by now you are all familiar with the Porsche Cayenne, the company's first foray into the world of 4x4s, and something that turned out to be ludicrously successful and highly lucrative for them. It could certainly be said that the Cayenne saved Porsche. But from the very beginnings, it had its detractors, and I can totally understand why, because we all know that at its core, this is a beefed up VW Touareg, or later Audi Q7, or even in some ways a detuned Lamborghini Urus, delete as applicable. It of course shared a great many parts with those cars, but both outside, in and under the bonnet, it was always distinctly Porsche. And because of that, I think it was always a cut above all of its competition. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, the one and only true rival this car has ever really had is a Range Rover. And that is saying something, because the Cayenne is playing in a segment that the Range Rover created. Now, don't forget, if after this video you decide to head towards Auto Trader in search of your perfect fast 4x4, take CarVertical with you. The super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including accident damage, mileage discrepancies, import status, usage as a taxi, or involvement in fire and theft. You can get all of that in just 60 seconds with only a registration or a VIN. And for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JAYEMM. This third generation landed back in 2017. In 2019, they introduced the Cayenne Coupe. And I apologise, I seem to be switching between Cayenne and Cayenne. I'm never entirely sure which one I am supposed to use. But regardless, in 2019 they thought, hey, you know that nice big practical 4x4 we make? Shall we make it a little less practical? Give it a nice sloping roofline, take away a little bit of boot space, and charge maybe another 1,500 quid? And a few people at the Porsche board went, yeah, that sounds like a very good idea, let's do it. And they did. So I drove a few years ago a Cayenne Turbo Coupe. And it was a marvellous thing, but if I'm honest, the coupe bit has always baffled me. The regular third gen car, I think, is actually a pretty decent looking thing. Certainly more shapely than the first gen car, and potentially prettier than the second too. Notably, this is the first generation of car where it hasn't shared its doors with the VW equivalent. And I have to say, as these things go, it is, I think, fairly easy on the eye. Just under 5 meters long and 2 meters wide, it is vaguely equivalent in size to, say, a Range Rover Sport. On the road, it feels maybe a little less easy to place, a little less wieldy, and I would say that this car is at the absolute limit of what you might term acceptable in day-to-day usage. But that's in Britain, and today I am not in Britain. Instead, I am in the beautiful and mountainous Principality of Andorra. And as you may have already noticed, some of Andorra is very, very narrow, with single streets that have to cope with far too much traffic and have some fairly aggressive and unforgiving walls. It is not really the natural place for the Porsche Cayenne. And yet, I would wager this is the second most popular car that I see around here, after perhaps the Fiat Panda 4x4, which makes an awful lot more sense, because it's still capable when the snow falls, and trust me, when it does in Andorra, it does it properly, yet it's not enormous. The parking spaces around here are all designed for something the size of an Austin Allegro, not an Aventador. Yet, because Andorra is a tax haven, there are lots and lots of nice cars around here. And so allow me to tell you a little bit more about this one. The GTS is a badge which has appeared on both of the previous generations of Cayenne, yet Porsche waited until 2020 to launch it for the third gen, and it followed essentially the same recipe as the cars that came before. It sits between the Cayenne S and the Turbo. It has more power than the S, less than the Turbo, but is designed to be the most focused car in the entire range. This is the one for the drivers. So here you have an engine that puts out just 20 horses more than the Cayenne S and some 80 less than the Turbo. But notably, this has a V8, where the regular Cayenne S has a V6. And this was in fact the first time that a Cayenne GTS had a V8 since the original. The total output here is 460 PS, with the later facelift cars getting 500, and torque is 457 pounds-feet. That's 620 Newton-meters. Regardless of whether you went with the standard coil suspension or, as we have it here, the optional air ride, the setup for the GTS was sharper and stiffer than any other in the lineup. It also received touches like a standard fit body kit, these GTS specific, more buckety seats, which I really do quite like, and a few pieces of trim designed to make it look like a slightly more aggressive car. The exhaust has also been retuned, so though it shares the same fundamental engine with the Turbo, it sounds just that little bit more aggressive. The standard feature list on these is relatively generous, though Porsche, as ever, do still have lots and lots of stuff as an option. But you have things like this nice combination of analog and digital gauges up front, so the rev counter is still old school, but either side of it you've got a pair of digital screens. Then in the middle, a nice big one giving you all of your infotainment and other functionality. I've got to say, I like this setup a bit more than that you got in the facelift. That landed in 2023 and gave you essentially the same setup as you'd see in a Taycan. So up front, you've got an all-digital display. The steering wheel is nice, thin-rimmed, BMW take note, not too much padding. You've also got plenty of controls on it, but all of which are fairly intuitive, fall easy to hand. There are nice metal paddles behind the wheel for when you want to change gears on this 8-speed ZF box yourself, and I will in a moment. Then down here you've got the traditional dial that you see on the majority of sporty Porsches, which allows you to switch between your driving modes. So you've got normal, sport, sport plus individual, and then in the middle a button that Porsche call Sport Response, which I think is a genius feature. Press that and for the next 20 seconds the car will go to full attack mode. It sets everything to its most aggressive. Ideal for that quick overtake, but when you know after a moment you want to just carry on as normal. The center console down here is a very fancy looking affair, though slightly tedious to use because most of the functions are touch sensitive and you have to look at them to work out what is going on. The seats are heated but not ventilated. They have lots of electric adjustment and memory settings too. Gotta say, I really like them. Visibility is actually not all that bad. The B-pillar is fairly chunky, the window at the back is slightly compromised, though I am delighted to say that unlike the Turbo Coupe I drove a few years ago, this does not have the optional lightweight package, which yes, is every bit as daft as it sounds in a 2 and a bit ton car. That ditches the lovely panoramic roof, replaces it with a carbon one that saves a few kilos you're never ever going to notice, and gives the car a Turbo GT style center exit exhaust at the back. Presently, I am in full auto, normal comfort mode, and the car is doing a very, very good job. These roads here are exceedingly well paved. They do have a few little rough sections here and there, but overall, the standard of tarmac is much, much higher than on any of my UK test routes. So there's a good chance that the car is being flattered. But even so, the engine does its job, even at low RPM and low throttle, makes a nice noise, but I do know when you begin to press on, it makes an even nicer one. But up until now, I've only seen it driving past for doing my drive-by shots. I've yet to experience it properly from this seat. So, when you want to have fun, what's it like? Let's find out. In a word, marvellous. This is yet another Cayenne that is far, far more entertaining than it has any right to be. Now this one's currently sat on all-season tyres, kind of normal around here. But in spite of all the weight, the fact that you know physics is against this, well, it drives like a hot hatch that's just let itself go a little bit, but still is desperate to impress. That engine takes a moment to gather its breath, but once it does, gives you nice linear performance all the way from next to no RPM to just shy of 7,000. One of the benefits of not making the numbers that the turbo does is that they all arrive that little bit earlier, and it makes this a very, very easy car to drive, either simply off the torque in the mid-range or letting it sing and enjoying the power. It is from about 3,000 RPM where it really does its best work, and you must remember, I'm currently at something like 3,500 feet. We are very, very high up here, and it's no doubt robbing the car of a little bit of power. Now for that little section there, I was in sport mode. I'm now going to try Sport Plus and see if that sharpens things up any more. Usually in Britain, I'd never even try that because it knackers the ride and therefore your enjoyment of the car. But here, the roads are just about good enough that you can cope with it. Even so, you can tell the car is now a lot firmer. These little lumps and bumps here, well, the car now feels just as bouncy as the Scuderia did. And in case you were wondering, yes, I have driven my Ferrari 430 Scuderia to Andorra. Why? For your enjoyment and mine. And if you haven't yet seen that video and you're wondering what on earth it is that I'm doing here, check that out. Thus far, just about the only thing I have actually had an issue with, and Sport Plus doesn't really seem to be changing it, is the gearbox. It's reasonably brisk, but there's just a moment of delay when you request a shift. Downshift in particular, you see that? So here I'm going along, 3,000 RPM, downshift, and there it is. It's not a deal breaker, but I'm a little bit surprised because, well, Porsche got this right a long, long time ago. Never mind. Let's press on, shall we? This is cracking. Now you do notice the lack of punch compared to the turbo. That is undeniable. And when they facelifted the car, the Cayenne S, not the regular Cayenne, also got a V8. That is almost certainly why they bumped this up to a nice neat 500 horses with a small increase in torque as well. And I'm sure you'd notice it. But even so, on a road like this, what the car has is certainly adequate. The big surprise today though, it's the chassis. This thing is ludicrously playful. These roads have a lot of hairpin turns where you've got to really slow down, then put the power down on the exit. And when you do, the thing turns around your waist like a big oversized Delta Integrale. It's awesome. Around town and certainly in normal mode, the steering is needlessly light, but when you put it in Sport, Sport Plus and press on, gains a little bit of weighting, not masses of feel, not masses of texture coming through it, but it does give you a constant reminder of the scale of what it is that you're piloting, and it gives you confidence. Confidence you definitely need for this bit. Now somehow, I have yet to actually drive any second generation Cayenne. Don't know how that's happened. Done plenty of first and done plenty of third. So I can't speak for that. But in the first generation, the GTS for me was just a bit of a disappointment. Those cars are a lot heavier than these, by some 300 kilos, and you do notice it. And it meant that the naturally aspirated V8s that those got, which did sound great, didn't have the punch that I think the chassis deserved. Here though, it's a different matter. And if you're not fussed about having the turbo and all of its firepower, I think this really is the sweet spot in the lineup. Even better, now they've been out a little while, you can get one at a fairly decent price. Today, a brand spanking new Cayenne GTS is going to set you back £106,100 plus options. The coupe then about £1,600 more. But if you're willing to hop into the classifieds and buy an early 2020 example, which you can still get with an official Porsche warranty, and these have actually proven fairly durable anyway, you could pay anywhere down to about 60,000 quid. And I think if someone were to come to me now and say, James, I want to buy myself a nice, fast, capable 4x4, where should I go? Range Rover or Cayenne? Well, the Range Rover is a great car, don't get me wrong, but as a sports car, the Cayenne has it licked. On the luxury front, the Range Rover still just about edges it, but there are more than enough problems with Range Rover today to make me say, without much hesitation, your money should go on the Porsche Cayenne. And if you want to know which one in the range to buy, I'm going to tell you the GTS. Coupe though? Bah, forget it. Just get the normal one, save a couple of quid. But whichever one you have, it'll put a big smile on your face. So, there we have it. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.